CBS had an idea to do a Johnny Carson show, and then they found out they were stuck because they didn't know who to get to play Johnny Carson.
In my last review, I talked about the Jack Benny program. I had found some DVDs of his while I was out thrifting, and now I'd like to talk about some more discs I picked up featuring the king of late night, Johnny Carson. These collections can be broken up into two groups, Johnny Carson on The Tonight Show and Johnny Carson before The Tonight Show, which is what I'm going to talk about today. I grew up watching the tail end of Johnny Carson's run. The year would have been about 1990. I was about 15, and this was his last couple years on television. My parents used to stay up and watch his show, or at least the monologue, and when I was old enough, I started staying up and watching it with them. I thought he was funny, but sometimes I found Johnny's humor a little corny and old-fashioned. I always wondered what he was like back when he was young and hip. These sets have finally given me a glimpse.
Go ahead, son.
Daddy!
I defy any loyal, red-blooded American to tune out any television show which begins with a 5-year-old boy whose first word is Daddy. Gee, actually, it's amazing what you can learn from children, just having them down on the program. As Cicero said, nunc sinc id verant sine ad finitum, which always struck me as rather amusing.
These collections feature Johnny on a number of different shows. So, in order to navigate what we've got here, let's do a little history of Johnny Carson first. Johnny grew up in Nebraska, just like my dad. I wonder if my dad ever saw Johnny on Nebraska local TV when he was a kid.
It's lovely countryside, isn't it? I think autumn is probably the most beautiful season in Nebraska. Most of us know it as the Cornhusker State. I simply call it home.
Johnny started entertaining people when he was young, doing comedy and magic for friends and family. This was covered briefly in The Story of Late Night, a Bill Carter series on CNN, and in the PBS American Masters King of Late Night, both of which I reviewed. Johnny served in the Navy and went to college where he studied radio. Afterwards, he got a job at TV station WOW, in Omaha as an announcer.
We were just WOW radio then. A few months later that year, 1949, WOW-TV went on the air. Carson had a radio show in the morning and a TV show in the afternoon.
I hope a good many of you are enjoying Christmas with your families today, and you've exchanged presents already, probably had a very nice Christmas dinner, and that you'll sit down and enjoy the Christmas with the gang here at WOW-TV.
Johnny Carson, Christmas Day, 1950. And it was done right here in this studio from a set that Carson called the Squirrel's Nest.
My name's Johnny Carson, and this program is called the Squirrel's Nest, sometimes Family Matinee, and sometimes quite a few other things. And a lot of you people are probably watching this show for the first time today with your new Christmas television set, and we hope this program won't let you down, and frankly, we know it will.
Other documentaries referred to it as The Squirrel's Nest, but all I could find from my research was a show called The Johnny Carson Show. The first. There's a story I read somewhere, but now I can't find, about Johnny being discovered by some traveling network executive who was in Nebraska on business. He told Johnny he had a bright future and ought to move out to Los Angeles. I like to think of Johnny's discovery like that scene in Wayne's World, where Wayne is doing his rinky-dink public access show in his mom's basement. He happens to be discovered by a TV executive who offers him a shot to do the same show on a network, and before you know it, Wayne is on a big studio set with a recreation of his mom's basement. I doubt it was anything like that. Here's what's written on Wikipedia, although it has no source. Carson supplemented his income by serving as master of ceremonies at local church dinners, attended by some of the same politicians and civic leaders he had lampooned on the radio. The wife of one of the Omaha political figures Carson spoofed owned stock on a radio station in Los Angeles, and in 1951 referred Carson to her brother, who was influential in the emerging television market in Southern California. At any rate, Johnny moved out to Los Angeles in 1951 and got a job at the CBS affiliate KNXT as an announcer for local programming. In October 1952, Johnny got his first TV hosting gig on a show he put together called Carson's Cellar. that aired locally in Los Angeles.
Now we're about to have a good time here, and I want you to meet this gentleman here.
Thank you.
And what is your name, sir?
Jack Bailey.
Jack Bailey.
Yes.
And where do you live, Mr. Bailey?
I'm a native Californian.
A native Californian.
Yes.
Well, that means that you must have lived here for at least 2 years then, huh?
This DVD set contains one episode of that show. It might be the only episode that still exists. Carson Cellar was written, produced, and directed by Carson himself. A half-hour showcase for wacky bits delivered to a small live audience. It aired once a week in a variety of changing time slots. First it ran on Saturdays, then Sundays, then Fridays. It ran for 26 weeks and generally got positive notices. Starting in April 1953, in what would have been week 27, it was retooled as The Johnny Carson Show. No episodes of this version have been released on any of the sets I've seen. It may no longer exist. A direct continuation of Carson Cellar, it added Bob Weisskopf as the new head writer, as well as a new director, John Gaunt, and a new regular time slot, Mondays at 10 p.m. I can't say why this version of the show only lasted 13 weeks. Perhaps reducing Johnny's role to merely on-air talent, which was supposed to help the production, lost some of the magic. Following the end of his first major gig, Johnny was given lots of odds and ends by the affiliate, such as hosting a summer replacement game show called Earn Your Vacation, which had previously been hosted by Steve Allen. Carson started hosting a humorous 5-minute news segment in the mornings, and I've also heard of another 5-minute show called Carson's Coffee Break. I don't know if these are the same show, but probably. Carson also started writing for other shows, some national, such as The Red Skelton Show. Red took a liking to Johnny, and would sometimes appear on Carson's Coffee Break, but in a non-speaking role, because Carson couldn't afford to pay him as an actor. But in a non-speaking role, he could just be paid as an extra. Having a big-name star attracted more sponsors, so Carson could play with a larger budget. Johnny's biggest break came in August 1954, when Red Skelton was injured practicing a stunt on his show.
The Red Skelton Review.
My name is Johnny Carson. This afternoon at dress rehearsal, just about an hour and a half ago, Red slipped during one of the sketches and injured himself. And the injury is not really too serious, but Red's doctor advised him that it wouldn't be too best to do the show today. Personally, I think Red's doctor should do the show.
With only an hour to prepare for the live taping, Johnny, a member of the show's writing staff, was tapped to guest host the show. This would be his first exposure to a national audience, not just Los Angeles. His notices were very good, and CBS started looking for a vehicle to put Johnny in for the national stage. This brings us to the heart of this review, The Johnny Carson Show, at least the version from 1955, which by my count is the third one. All of these DVD sets contain multiple episodes of this show. Airing Thursdays at 10 p.m. on CBS, this was a national primetime show, a half-hour sketch comedy.
Johnny Carson Show. Johnny Carson.
Johnny started each show greeting the audience with a monologue, then segued into the comedy bits.
Thank you very much, and welcome to another Thursday night. This has been a pretty interesting week. I suppose most of you folks who've been reading the papers have found out that they have just solved the Brinks robbery after 6 years in Boston. And even though they've solved the robbery, you know that not 1 cent of over that $1.5 million was ever found? It's amazing. I don't want to, start any rumors or anything, but I also noticed that the government announced that the budget was balanced this year. Suppose there's any connection, but I thought I'd bring it up.
This time, Johnny was able to book some pretty notable guest stars.
And now, ladies and gentlemen, a man who really needs no introduction. Mr. Jim King, the gas meter inspector of the Santa Monica area. Thank you, Jim. Well, I guess that's all the celebrities we have in the audience tonight. Rudy Valley. Rudy, I think you'd enjoy the show much more from down in front. I want to thank you for coming up. It's very nice of you to come up, Rudy. Thank you so much.
Could have been worse. He could have had the Connecticut Yankees in his pocket.
Tonight, what we've done, Jim, we brought a mirror, a large mirror on stage here, and I thought maybe you could show the kids and try to see if you can outdraw yourself.
Why didn't you ever ask me to marry you?
Because, my darling, I was leaving for the 100 Years' War.
Now, wait a minute. If you are in the 100-Year War, what are you doing here?
Our whole platoon got a 25-year pass.
A lot of the skits were based on current trends.
You know, if this trend keeps up, machines taking over, I would like to show you what could possibly happen in the year 1980. Hi, honey, I'm home. I'm home, honey. Oh. Hello, Gregory.
My name is Gregory. I am a robot. I am your servant.
Yeah, well, mix me a drink, blabbermouth, will you?
Drink. Gin, bourbon, scotch, brandy. What'll you have?
Current movies or TV.
Thank you. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and all you cockneys in the French area. Tonight on the show, we have some very exciting things. First of all, you're going to see on our show tonight a film clip from the new motion picture At Gunpoint. And as a matter of fact, we might as well show it to you now. Widescreen, of course, you see. Looks like it's going to be a really, really, really good clip.
History or folklore.
Hey, it's from my beloved Helen of Troy. It says, Dear Hector, I know you're trying to get into the city again. If you succeed, you'll want my number. It's 5 long and 3 short smoke puffs. If a man answers, put out your fire.
Johnny's only regular co-star was singer Jill Corey.
Hi, Jill Corey.
Hi, Jill. Ladies and gentlemen, I wish you'd watch the next portion of the program very closely. It may lead to a spot on climax for both of us. Hi, Jill. Notice the use of the short dramatic sentences?
I was just reading this week's issue of TV Guide.
Oh?
Who do you think is on the cover?
Winnie Ruth Judd?
No. It's you and your wife, Jody.
Really? Uh-huh. Well, Glorioski, Zero. Isn't that... She was very sweet of you. Very sweet of you to mention that, Jill.
I've got a crush on you, sweetie pie. All the day and night time, hear me sigh. I never had the least notion that I would fall with so much emotion.
Corey stayed with the show for most of its run, but left in early 1956 to join the Robert Q. Lewis program. More on that show later. One thing that was often noted about the show was its high turnover of writers and producers.
And could you tell me how many people from CBS actually work on your show? About half of them.
Entertainment reporter Eve Starr commented, CBS has shown a lot of faith in Carson, sticking with him through thick, thin, and a dozen writers. Given that kind of backing, he's bound to make the grade. Reviews seemed mixed, saying Carson showed promise, but was perhaps a little too low-key. Critic Leo Mishkin felt there were no great yaks in it, no belly-busting guffaws, and so far as the formula and format are concerned, not even any great departure from dozens of other summer replacement variety shows, but still a pleasant way of passing a half hour. Carson said, the sponsors think that in a comedy show, you gotta have the audience screaming. I don't believe you can belt that way on TV. How can you belt comedy at a guy sitting at home with a can of beer in his hand? And critic Charles Denton noted, ratings or no ratings, Johnny doesn't believe his low-pressure comedy style let him down. He intends to stick to it if his show returns to the air next season. Alas, the show was not renewed after its initial 39-week commitment. Carson complained that every executive connected with the show wanted to produce and direct the series, and that he never knew what guest stars were to be with him, and that he generally was given a rough shuffle. According to critic Harold Heffernan, his cancellation hinged on a fraction of a point on the viewer ratings. The show receives fine reviews from critics throughout the country. And Heffernan adds, Carson is now so disgusted with the frantic business that he plans to direct his future attention exclusively to motion pictures. As a footnote, according to IMDb, Carson never wrote, produced, or directed a movie, but he did act in one, as himself, in the 1964 romantic comedy Looking for Love, starring Connie Francis and Jim Hutton.
I'm just looking for love. I don't want fortune and I don't want fame. Don't want everybody to know my name. Yeah, oh. I'm just looking for love.
I'm talking about The Tonight Show.
On television. Johnny Carson. Your show is my most favorite when I can't go to sleep.
I'm thrilled to hear that.
So the primetime show ended. But just 2 months later, Johnny debuted the new daytime Johnny Carson Show, replacing the aforementioned Robert Q. Lewis Show. Take that, Jill Corey. As per reporter Terry Vernon, Johnny Carson is one of the young comics who's just never been given the right spot to properly exhibit his talents, but CBS is so sold on him that they'll keep trying. The new Johnny Carson Show debuts at 11 a.m. in place of the old Robert Q. Lewis Show, and maybe Johnny will click with the housewives. The daytime show, it turns out, only lasted 18 weeks compared to the primetime show's 39. However, the primetime show only aired once a week, whereas the daytime show aired 5 days a week, racking up 90 episodes. But I've only ever seen one episode on any of these collections, so it may be possible that there's only one episode of the daytime show that still exists.
From Hollywood, the Johnny Carson Show.
The daytime show appeared to be a panel show, with Johnny hosting a group of talking heads.
Good morning, group.
Good morning.
Try that again.
Good morning.
Johnny was aided by Glenn Turnbull, singer Lori Carroll from the Broadway cast of Plain and Fancy, and singer Pete Hanley, as well as the New Yorkers musical group. The episode I saw featured a bit where Johnny assigned some homework to the panel.
And we were talking about it the other day, and everybody on the show agreed to come in with one or some kind of a riddle of that vintage. Who wants to start it off? Pete?
All right. How many young ladies does it take to reach from New York to Philadelphia?
I don't know. How many?
100. Because a miss is as good as a mile.
And then there was an odd feature about lizard racing.
We actually are going to have a derby today because up in Coalinga, California, every year, and this year they had the 20th California Horn-Toad Derby.
Are you, Mark? Ready? Get set. Go!
Go!
Come on.
Contrary to the notion that his daytime show was for housewives, Carson said his show won't be slanted strictly towards women. Consider the number of men who have days off during the week. If it wasn't significantly large, daytime baseball, for instance, would perish.
Thank you. Welcome back to the second half of our show. You know, being Memorial Day, as I mentioned as we started the show, we have a lot of folks watching who don't see our show in the daytime, like husbands, for example, are home today, and they probably wonder what their wife does during the daytime. So if you fellows are watching the show and your wife is watching the show, now you know what she does during the daytime and you can take appropriate action.
The show must have been hungry for new talent, as they added a featured singer, Betty Holt, about 2 months in. And then, a month after that, veteran film star Clara Kimball Young as their Hollywood correspondent. Sounds kind of like Rona Barrett. And a few weeks after that, the show was canceled. Despite its good rating and good reviews, the networks are flooding the daytime with reruns, Carson mourned. This means somebody who's trying something fresh in a live show, something different from quiz programs, is taken off the air. Although Johnny's show ended, CBS liked him well enough to sign him to a 5-year contract, with plans to find him something to do pretty soon. Even though he had his eye on a live tour and some possible movie roles, Johnny was soon signed to the show that would really put him on the map. Who Do You Trust? An afternoon game show where he was first paired with announcer Ed McMahon.
And, Ed, who's first to lead
We're
off?
all set. We have Lola Mason from right here in Manhattan.
Yeah.
And Louis Baudet from the Bronx.
Louis will let you make the decisions whether you want to trust yourself or trust Lola on first names of famous people. First names of famous people. Want to answer it yourself, or?
I think Lola would know more of them.
All righty. What was the first name of Caruso? The great
Enrico.
Enrico Caruso. How about music? Songs through the years. Lola again?
Lola again.
A favorite for almost half a century. Listen.
Alexander's
that's tough, isn't it? I don't know why we bothered to ask. Why don't we just give him the money?
Yes, why don't you?
You know.
Johnny hosted that show for 5 years, and it would eventually lead him to his job on The Tonight Show. But we're not quite done yet. There's still one more show called The Johnny Carson Show.
Streaming for the first time, The Johnny Carson Show is coming to Shout Factory TV. Hand-picked episodes from Carson's remarkable run on The Tonight Show, spanning 4 decades.
May I have silence, please?
Good. You've had it many times before.
That's right. The Tonight Show starring Johnny Carson has now been rebranded as The Johnny Carson Show for streaming.
We predict you'll love it.
For those of you too young to remember, Johnny Carson was once the highest paid performer in all of television, or so I've read. At one point, it was said he was bringing in 75% of all of NBC's revenue. He was so powerful that when he renegotiated his contract in 1980, he got something that very few, maybe no one else has ever gotten. He got ownership of The Tonight Show from NBC, past and present and future. So all the episodes produced up until then became his, and all the ones he would continue to produce became his. That's why now it's Carson Entertainment, run by Johnny's nephew, Jeff Sotzing, which owns The Tonight Show and licenses it out for clips and episodes and everything else.
Tell people how and where these are stored.
They are all in a salt mine in Kansas, in Hutchinson, Kansas. It's fireproof. It's the same humidity, it's the same temperature, and there had been a fire right next to the warehouse where our tapes were stored in L.A., and the people from Underground Vaults and Storage in Hutchinson came to us and said, you know, we have this facility, and we'll make you a great deal. So not only was it great for us to be able to move it to Kansas for security, but when they did that, then they had to barcode everything. And when they barcoded everything, then I had a really good idea of what we had. So, I mean, there's probably 100,000 pieces of videotape in the vault. Johnny was powerful enough to say to NBC at that time, you know, I want to have possession of all this material. I want to make sure that nothing is destroyed from now on. He was just had the vision to say, let's protect this. He never expected it to be as successful as it was, but he definitely had some vision.
And this is why, presumably now, he can't use the name The Tonight Show, which is still being used by NBC for Jimmy Fallon. In a future video, I'll break down Johnny's Tonight Show and where it can be found. But for now, there's a rather piecemeal smattering of episodes on Prime Video and these other fine streaming services. It seems to mostly be repeats of collections that were on DVD previously. You can also watch clips and some full episodes on Johnny Carson's YouTube channel. For Fanboy Films and the Late Night Saga, this is E-Rock. Keep watching them. I'll keep making them.
Oh, yes. Excuse me. What is it?
Have you seen the sign?
Oh, yes. It says occupancy of this studio limited to 300 people. I know you folks have seen these before. They're in studios and restaurants, all public gathering places. And I think the fire department should be commended for doing a wonderful job.
But, Mr. Carson, we've counted the audience, and there are 301 people in the studio tonight.
Well, that's certainly a nice crowd, isn't it?
You don't understand, Mr. Carson. One person has to leave.
Oh, now look, you see, these people who've got tickets, they're really my guests in the show tonight. We're delighted that they're here. And you certainly can't expect one person in the audience to leave tonight.
That's true. But one person still has to leave.
Well, just who do you think is going to go out here?
Jim.
I mean, somebody... Look, wait a minute!
Others Stars in tonight's cast were John Stevenson, Peter Leeds, Gloria Talbot, Havis Davenport, Rudy Lee, Mimi Gibson, Richard Hale, Lenny Brennan, Ed Fury. The Carson Cuties, Theona Bryant, Sally Todd, and Phyllis Applegate. This is John Carson speaking. Tune in next week when the Johnny Carson Show will be brought to you by pre-cooked minute rice for perfect rice without cooking and Jell-O, America's favorite gelatin dessert.